Good morning. Continuing our journey in Hemshech Samach Vav. We are page 59. Middle of, on 10 lines or 7 lines down the top of the page. And of course, the topic at hand is Zman, time. Time as an integral component of existence. Clearly very integral, because even more than Mokim, than space, the Alter Rebbe in his original Maimer, upon which this Samach Vav is based, is focusing on time. That Keser, Ratzon, is higher than the time of each structure of that Keser. Every Partzuf is defined by the time of that Partzuf, meaning the Gdim of the Ichur, the sequence, the order, the hierarchy, the progression, as we've discussed. And then there's what's Lamayla Mizman, the Keser of that level. This doesn't negate the importance of Mokim, because he did refer to it a few times, but clearly Zman is definitely the bigger discussion, especially the Hisavas Hazman, how Zman comes to be. So that's what we've been learning in that context, to understand that idea of Ratzon, Primis HaRatzon, and existence. The language went over from Ratzon being a reflection of an expression of the core, of the essence, with the koiches having their own identity, relatively speaking, and then to the discussion that everything is made up of time, of Zman, and b'chol parts of a parts of the Keser of that level is beyond that, is L'mayla Mizman. And that led us into the discussion of Zman itself, which is what we've been learning essentially from the beginning of this Maimer, page 57. So far what we've established is that Zman has its particular parameters, meaning where it exists, the world of Bria. There's Zman also in Atzilus, which he called Seder Zmanim. The Atzilus of every level is the Keser of that level, is that which is L'mayla Mizman, even higher than Seder Zmanim. And as we haven't really discussed what Seder Zmanim is, he just mentioned it. It is discussed by the Samach Tzedek, and actually I just finished learning it inside at least one of the sources. And I'll share my findings, so to speak, when necessary, not yet. And then he went into the Sheresh Inyan Hazman. What is the root of Zman? So Sheresh Inyan Hazman, he says, is Ratzo v'shuv. Ratzo v'shuv, what we call the oscillation, the rhythm of, I've been calling it recession and expansion. Ratzo v'shuv, it can be withdrawal and extension, histalkus and hispashtus, in the words of the Maimer. And that's when you shaykh k'dima v'yichur. Then you could talk about a hierarchy, a sequence, because as you've said it right away, as long as the flow continues without any pause, and there's no back and forth, there's no to and fro, there's no ratzo and shuv, then it'll just be one level. Kulam b'shava, he said. Kulam boyin b'shava. So the Sheresh Sibas Hazman is ratzo v'shuv. Histalkus and hispashtus. Compared to the breath of a human being, exhale, inhale, every moment we inhale a new ruach chayim, a new of a chayis, a new chayis, and immediately it returns back to its source, only to be nimshcha again in a perpetual fashion. And so too it is when we say chayis ratzo v'shuv. Lamayla, in Alakus, means the chayis aliki. The divine energy isn't just a regular flowing entity, like let's say a river. A river just flows. You don't find in a river, I mean, there are times that a river may pause or may digress or may break apart and branch off. But a river is a flowing, forward-flowing entity. And Ratzo v'shuv is a constant back and forth. And that's the chayis aliki, is exactly like the breath. You can call it the cosmic breath, divine breath. Chayis aliki shenimshech lahachis ha'elemes. So right after it's nimshach, immediately returns ratze back to its source. And so is it in Atzilus. And he specifically, in other words, in general, the Chayes Eliki is that way on all levels. And now specifically in Atzilus, the bottom of page 58, he said in Atzilus, it works like this. There's Osir V'Shuv, the Oir is in a form of Rotze, meaning it's Nimshach, but it's in a Nimshach in a form that's constantly returning and yearning back, yearning and longing to return to its source. I can explain elsewhere the reason for that. And that's what causes Ischalkus Hazman. So let's spell out now. So I'm reading the last lines of page 58 and top of 59 where we reached in the last class. So Ischalkus Hazman, because now that there's Istalkus and Ispashtus, there's a two-pronged flow, so to speak, a dual flow, if you wish. Because the oil doesn't just flow, the oil flows and returns. So there you have, right there, something that's creating a structure, something that's creating a sequence, a progression, what we're calling kedima ve'ichur. If it just flowed forward and it was not istalkus and ispashtus back and forth, it wouldn't pause. Then it would just be bligvul, since the earth is bligvul, just continues bligvul. But now that it's in a form of istalkus and nishpastus, it's nimsik b'shachase, harizemokil ischalkus hazman. So this becomes the source for the structure and the distinction of time. And time is all about distinction, as we know, all the way from seconds to minutes to hours to days to weeks to months to years, decades, centuries, millennia, and so on. I'm spelling that out because it's Samach Tzedek actually in Derech Mitzvah on the Maimer Hamonas Alakus, which was noted already here earlier. It was noted earlier. The two Maimorim from the Samach Tzedek. Just want to refer them to you when he spoke about Seder Zmanim. Right here. Footnote 17. I'm sorry, footnote 18. 18. Yeah. So there's a famous mimer called Hamonas Alakus, means the faith in God, where the Samach Tzedek in Derech Mitzvah, namely chapter 11 and on, where he discusses a lot of these themes. It's interesting to compare. A lot of commonalities, but you definitely see the Rebbe Rashab's additions. But there's also another mimer in Biuri Hazer, which I still have to go through. I'll let you know what I find there. Okay. Biuri Hazer and also Sefer Hakira. So bottom line, structure of time is Ischalkus Azman, like we just said. That's the Makakin, Azman hu hefsek. That's what Zman is. Zman tells you, when you say time, the very fact that you're saying time, you're designating a time, or you're giving something a timeline or a deadline, so to speak, is a hefsek. That's what Zman is. Zman is a flow with a hefsek. Something will extend an hour or two. Because after the hour or two, nifsech kam shachet. Whatever is being nimshach, whatever is extending, is pauses or stops at that point, ends at that point, expires if you wish. If it continued without a hefsek, you can't say an hour or two. You can't give it a time designation. If you say Shabbos is from 1 hour, a certain hour to another hour, that immediately tells you there's a hefsek. So it's bepnei nifsek shezeu inyan azman ulezei is bechinas a hefsek shebe'er zeu mokar azman. So since Hashem and godliness is above time, so the question is, how does time emerge? Obviously, again, God could do anything he wants, but he wanted to do it in a logical way. So he created in his own divine energy a hefsek. He didn't just let it flow. He created gradations in his own energy flow called ratzo and shov, and as such, that creates the ischalkus, that the hefsek that will create the structure of time, mokar azman, source of zman. But then he added one more point, which we learned yesterday, and I'm going to go over that now. He said like this: the gam, additionally, I'm going to read it again. I'm reading now the fifth line, page 59. pages you can find at samachvav.com. But another point in this is interesting. The Tzemach Tzedek in his Maimer just brings the idea of ischalkos. There he actually doesn't even use ratzo v'shuv. He uses tzimtzum and ispashtus, just for the record. But here too, essentially, he does say istalkus and ispashtus. So he says like this: the gam bistalkus v'ispashtus. An additional point, which I didn't see that Samach Tzedek say explicitly. Yeshkan inyan hazman. In the istalkus v'ispashtus itself, you also have an inyan hazman, because it's not just that it creates a structure of division, like dividing. Here, the energy flows, it returns, flows further, returns, and so on. Constantly new, like breath. So now you can count the breaths. You can count that. That's that structure of time. But the very istalkus and ispashtus, he says, indicates on past and future. Because istalkus means something that happened. Ispashtus means something that will happen. So he says like this. Kimasha nistalaku ovar. That which has been removed, has been withdrawn, the energy that has, the ratzo energy that has returned to its source is ovar, is past. Umasha mispasha to osid. And that which extends is the next, is the future. So you say, for example, my last breath, my next breath. So by the mere definition that you have one that just happened and one that will happen, that itself is past and future. So we have here again time of over and osid, in addition to the point he made before. Now, there's much that can be discussed about this second point, but I want to continue on because I want to see how he builds it, and then we can go back to it. Because the immediate question I asked myself is, he definitely doesn't mean physical time, as in yesterday and today. Excuse me, sorry. He's definitely referring to conceptual time, kedima v'ichur. So what is the point that he wants to make here? The fact that, so earlier, is the point that he said earlier, I might as well say it because he said it already earlier, now I realize. Is the point because now that you have, let's say Keser is the first level. Okay, then Keser is nistalik, Hamshach of Keser, Shuv of Keser. Then there's a ratzo. Keser returns, so to speak, recedes, like he said earlier. Keser nimshach v'nifsek hamshachase v'nimshach b'chinas ha'chochma. Now chochma comes. So chochma is now. Let's compare Keser and chochma to two breaths. The first breath was Keser. The first divine breath, Keser. Particular level, very unique level. Of course, a higher level, and so on. Then there's a hafsake, a nifsek, in the sense of the ratzo shuv, doesn't just continue to flow, it returns to allow now for the next breath, the breath of the divine breath of Chochmah. So there's past and what does he mean there? Future and past and future. Past meaning Gedima, that Keser precedes Chochmah. So he doesn't mean it in the physical sense necessarily that it's a second earlier or a second later. He means it conceptually. Or you could say that he actually means also physical time. Why not? If Chayes Eliki is in the state of ratzo v'shuv, so it's true, in Atzilus, you don't yet have physical time. But when you do have physical time in this existence, why can't you say that every second is another form of divine energy? Like right now, there's a divine energy. In a second, there's a new divine energy. That's called ratzo v'shuv. And there you have time itself. So in addition to the structure of time, the first point he made, that there's the ratzo v'shuv creates the what I call before the gradations, the structure, the divisions, the steps between each moment in time. The very fact that every second is a new energy of time. I do lean to say that because I think he's going to say that in a few minutes. That's why I wanted to wait. But I said it now. Fine, so be it. Bottom line is,
according to this, there is man.
One second. Bottom line is that time. Both explanations that he's giving, both as elements, and they're not two different explanations. They're two complementary ones. Are explain how time is manufactured, how time is engineered, how it becomes a reality. Want to say something?
According to this, Zman is kipshuta also in a much higher level, not only in the Shtalshalos.
What do you mean? That's the whole point that he's making here. That I discussed this at length yesterday. That Zman starts in in ratzo v'shuv of
But that's
the root of
Kdima v'Ichur. That's Kdima v'Ichur, not Zman kipshuta.
There's no Zman kipshute in those levels. Zman kipshute is only where there is a physical time and space.
Right.
Okay, good. Does anybody want to ask anything before we continue? Okay, so let's continue. Now he says like this.
Rebbe, I have a question. I've been meaning to ask you. It's relating to something you've said 2 or 3 classes now, maybe more. The Rebbe said it here. That within every world, if you will, or every level, there is a keser, and then that keser is above the time of that world. I'm confused by that because it says the time itself, the actual time we understand, begins in Bria, which makes sense to me because that's part of the creation.
Keser is Atzilus of every world.
Yeah, but how can every world, like, why would time be different in Bria than Asiya? Time is time. So why? I understand everything.
No, hold on. No, that's not correct. What you just said.
Oh yeah, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Of course, we've been discussing it at length. This physical time, this conceptual time. Chachma precedes Bina, but not necessarily in physical time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I understand. Thank you. Now I get it. Thank you.
Right. Now, you need to explain the difference in Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya. That we didn't discuss. This is basically the difference between Seder Zmanim and Zmanim in a way. Physical time, conceptual time, or the concept of time. But we're going to discuss it more. Yeah. Okay, good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure. Well, Befrat, okay, we're now 7 lines from top of page 59. The line that begins with Osid. samachvav.com, there you can find the pages. It says, Ubefrat, and now specifically, and I think he's going to say exactly what I just said. I didn't realize it was immediate. I thought it was going to come a little later. And specifically, Shachayis Hanimshech Hu'or V'chayis Acher. Okay. So till now, what we've said so far is the following: that Ratzo v'shuv by definition is structure. What I mean by structure, I don't just mean structure. I mean divisions, spaces. Ratzo v'shuv. So there's movements. That movement immediately tells you there's something in music. Anyone here maybe knows the language. When you learn music, they teach you very important. I don't think it's called the beat, but there's the timing between one note and the next.
Syncope.
Is that what it's called?
I think it's called syncope. I think.
Okay, but it's very much, when you're familiar with it, you understand very much the timing is very much all about a pause. If you, let's say, started playing musical notes one on top of each other, it could be beautiful music. You won't be able to understand or appreciate it at all. So space and timing is critical. And the word timing, I'm specifically using the word timing. So in a way, if God, Ein Sof is like one infinite sound that has the timeless and spaceless sound, and in a sense, the Ratzo v'shuv is what creates the music, the musical notes. So if you think of it even from a point of view like a flute, you blow into a flute, your blow itself, if the flute did not have any holes and did not have any gradations, it would just be a sound. It would be like a shofar. So yes, you can technically with your mouth, you could regulate it to some extent, atkiya, shvarim, shtrua. But when you have, let's say, holes inside of the flute, so those holes serve as a role of a timing and structure that gives the sound shape and form. I'm using that very intentionally because in other Maimorim he talks about how from a shape, not shapeless, what's the word I want to say? Undefined sound, like just like the sound of a tkiya, like ooh, how that turns into shapes and forms when you give it when you create shape and form. So to get it back to what we're discussing, so ratzo v'shuv creates that form in the Ein Sof, in the as it flows, and that's the istalkus and the ispashtus of ratzo v'shuv, and that in turn creates structure. So now we have istalkus hazman. Good. Additionally, the istalkus, like he just said, is the ovar, is the past, and the ispashtus, the extension, is the future, is the osid. Like we said, like every breath, every form, every stage of energy. Now he's adding and saying specifically that would be the case even if it was the same chayas. He already said it's a different chayas. In other words, ratzo v'shuv is not like, let's go back to the example of the river. It's not just a river that's, what happens when something sputters? It's not a river just going back and forth the same water. That's not ratzo v'shuv. Ratzo v'shuv is the energy returns. It's a new energy, like a new breath. You're not breathing the same air one breath after the next. But he's now emphasizing, so you could say it's a chayes acher, it's a new energy, but not necessarily a unique energy. But a befrat shachayes animshcho v'chayes acher. It's a different energy and vitality. Shachayes adisha nichl b'mkeireh. The first energy level that flowed, meaning the first one that came as the shuv and then ratzo returned, that nichl b'mkeireh, that was nichl b'mkeireh. V'nimshach chayes acher. And another level of energy has now arrived. So even if it was not another level of energy, even if it was the same energy, just, you could say regenerated or refreshed or just the same energy, it still creates structure. But now that it's another chayes, that really creates much more definition in time. And he brings now from Tanya, which is really from the Zohar and from different sources, in Perek Mem Aleph, chapter 41 in Tanya. So he says like this: "Be'inyan yud beis sirufi havaya va'adnai." Okay, I'll first explain before we read it inside. So there he says, and I believe the source is from Zohar. I mean, you have to look it up in Tanya, that there are 24 hours in the day. 12 hours day, 12 hours night. Now we know it's not always 12 hours day, night, but overall, that's how we divide it. Like so every hour, it corresponds to another tziruf of the name of God. And there's two names that he refers to, Havaya and Adnai. Both of them have 4 letters. However, both of them have 2 hays. And as such, it's really 3 letters. So 3 times 4, if you make the combinations, is 12. So basically, like Yud, K, Vav, K, would be 1 siruf. Yud, Vav, K would be a second siruf. He doesn't spell out the sirufim. The word siruf means combination. Different ways to combine. Like we talked about, if you recall, Shema, Shem Ban. There, it's based on the miluyim, not the siruf. It's a different way of configuring the letters of Havaya. But another of them is siruf. So 12 months of the year, by the way, also correspond to 12 different sirufim. Every month has its siruf. So essentially, every hour corresponds to another divine configuration, essentially. So the energy flows to that hour in that way. There's a famous story that when the Alter Rebbe was in prison, so there was a prison, there was no day and night. It was in a dungeon. He didn't know when it was day and night, but he knew when it was day and night from the tzirufim. He knew, he could sense from the tziruf that changed in Elikus, he could sense the change of an hour. He didn't need a clock. That's how sensitive he was to the cosmic and divine energy around him. So bottom line is, the actual breakdown of how the tzirufim go, probably, maybe Yitzchak, if you want to look it up, you'll probably easy to find, and you can post exactly each tziruf of Havaya and Adnai. I believe Havaya is day. The 12 hours of the days corresponds to the 12 hours of Havaya, and the 12 hours of the night, 12 hours of Adnai. Now remember, Adnai is a way of expressing Havaya. That's how we pronounce. We don't pronounce Havaya. We say Adnai. Even Adnai is not the way we say it. I'm saying it with a change of inflection, because we don't say the name. It's a holy name. But we can look up if you really want to know what they correspond to. But the bottom line that's relevant to us here is that the hours, basically the structure of time, is each one is a chayes acher. The chayes of 12 to 1 o'clock is different than 1 to 2, and 2 to 3 is different, and from 9 to 10 is different than from 10 to 11. So every hour has its particular divine energy. So every breath is not just another breath, it's a chayes acher. Okay, now he continues. Let's continue, and I'll soon stop for questions if there are any. The b'chol rega, I know this may make you jump. It should say b'chol shah, right? So he says, the b'chol rega nimshach tziruf chadash. Every moment, a new tziruf, a new combination of the letters are nimshach, is transmits. So you can say, why does he say rega? We just said 12, as in 12 hours. So let's look at the footnote. We'll read the footnote together. The Rebbe, when he made his mafteach in Tanya, and he actually cited the Samach Vav, wondering why he says the word rega, not shah. So I'll just read footnote number 30. Tanya sham, b'chol shah v'shah. Obviously. In Tanya it says every hour is a new tziruf, not every second. Ub'mafteach hagaz va'aris amash kosav al sefer shabenim, sorry. So the Rebbe has footnotes and gloss notes on Tanya, based on what it says in the Maimorim. The Rebbe took all the Maimorim of the Rebbe Rashab, and wherever the Rebbe Rashab said something on Tanya, the Rebbe collected it together in an organized way. So there, the Rebbe Meir Chakad Murzia, there the Rebbe notes as follows: B'simin kriya, with an exclamation point, Alosh na maimer kan de b'chol rega. So the Rebbe writes chol rega, question, exclamation point, clearly emphasizing that it's a wonder that the Rebbe Rashab is changing shah to rega. Now, it's not a kasha really, because the fact of the matter is, if you think about it, the same logic. If every hour there's a new divine energy, every second there's also divine energy. The question is why the Rebbe, why the Rebbe Rashab felt it important to emphasize. I would speculate because he wants to emphasize here. In Tanya, it's only there he's coming to explain the hours, how every hour has its energy. In Samach Vav, he wants to explain how time, every second in time is another breath, another part of the structure of past and present that creates the structure of time. But still, it's interesting, and the Rebbe notes it, that he changed in Samach Vav the word shah to rega. Just pointing out here how some of the dynamics behind the scenes, how when the Rebbe would edit and read these things, and then he left us a note on this matter. Had the Rebbe not left us a note, we probably would have noticed it ourselves. I mean, I would have noticed it because I'm familiar with this Tanya, of course. But with the Rebbe's pointing it out, it makes it even stronger. So it doesn't add any real havana to the whole subject matter, but it's a little, let's call it trivia, if you wish, or more than trivia. I wouldn't call it chaz v'shalom, it's not really trivia. It's more of the arum, as they say, discussion around the topic that we're addressing here. Okay, fine. I'll stop if anybody wants to ask anything.
A couple of things, just points of order. I just posted in the WhatsApp group explanations of the 12 tzirufei of Zman of time within
Okay, great. Thank you.
Shemavaya. And then secondly, I said that rhythm that makes music have pace is as a muscle for time is called meter, not
Okay.
syncopation. So sorry.
Okay.
Syncopation is actually the opposite. When there's an offbeat, like when there's an emphasis on a dagesh on something that's not mamish within the beat, it creates a certain kind of intrigue because it's contrasted against the meter. So I apologize for giving you the wrong word.
That's all right. Don't worry. Thank you. Okay, and thank you for posting. Very good. Okay, let's continue. So this is the befrat. So every chayes is its own second, its own tziruf chadash. So now the Rebbe Rashab qualifies and says, "Umasha oimrim shachayes ubchinas ratzo v'shuv." So and when we say that the chayes is in the state of ratzo v'shuv, that was the whole basis of our discussion here. Ratzo v'shuv as in to and fro, a to and fro movement. There's another expression. What does it go? Flow and what's the opposite of flow? When you say to and fro, flow and ebb and flow? Maybe ebb and flow.
Very good. Go ahead.
Yeah, ebb and flow. It also works well here. In the waves, especially in the context of a wave. Again, as you see, I don't hesitate to use any term that can help, even then there's no term that's perfect. So if someone comes up with something that you feel can fit and work, by all means, that's what Chassidus is, trying to make it as real and palatable and palpable as possible. Okay, so now he says like this. So this whole process, so he's now, in a sense, asking a question. Well, it's not a question, it's a qualification. When you say chayes ratzo v'shuv, doesn't indicate it's a new chayes. It just says energy flows not straight, but like an ebb and flow, to and fro. It flows, it returns, and then returns again. Like I gave the example before, let's say a river that has that type of strange flow. It doesn't just flow in a straight line. It flows, returns, flows, So what do you mean by, so what we say chayes, that, in the literal meaning of that is that the same energy, it's not two different chayes. It's not like one, it's not, you would think, for example, let's say you had a watch, you had someone who's standing watch, you hire a guard, his hours is to stand from 12 to 1, he has to watch your door. Then he leaves, a new guard comes. That's not ratzo v'shuv. That's a replacement. Yes, you constantly have a shemer, no problem. You constantly have someone watching you, but you wouldn't call that chayes ratzo v'shuv. It's not the same chayes. It's not like breath. Breath is chayes coming. It just comes in so-called, I don't want to, spurts is not the word, in an orderly progression. The Rebbe Rashab is going to address what that right now. He says like this. That means oisei achayes atzmei. Hainu klolos b'chinas achayes ahu. That's referring to the general chayes. So like the general chayes is one chayes, is the divine energy that is flowing in order to create existence. Like we've talked about a machadash b'tuv b'chol yom tamid, a perpetual energy to create existence. Or in the human being, as far as breath goes, oxygen that's flowing into the human being to energize the soul, to energize the human being in all possible ways. So overall, it's one form of energy. Klolos hachayis. Who the klolos hachayis ahu the mebchinas shem avaya or mishem adnai. In context of the yud-based sirufim, before we talk about the different hours or the different minutes or seconds, there's a klolos hachayis. By day, you have from Shem Havaya. By night, from Shem Adnai. He doesn't say that explicitly, but he says, Chayes either mebchinas Shem Havaya or Mishem Adnai. Hu b'bchinas ratzo v'shuv. And how does that energy flow from Havaya or Adnai? In a state of ratzo v'shuv. It's not a straight flow. Ebb and flow, like we said, to and fro, extension, receding, extending, withdrawing, expanding, and so on. But once you break down the chayes itself, if you think of it in more detail, the chayes itself specifically, b'chol rega, and here it clearly says b'chol rega, every second nimshach tziruf chadash. Every second is a new tziruf. So it's not a contradiction. Overall, it's chayes aliki. And in general terms, havaya, adnai. And then you come talk about breaking it down into each tziruf, every rega. Lo yatziruf hakedem shahaya berega shalifaneha. And it's not the tziruf, it's not the combination that was there a previous second. That changed. But it's still a tziruf of Shem Havaya. It's not some other entity, foreign entity that has entered. It's just that Havaya itself has changed so-called shape. So think of it this way. I'm just visualizing it. If you think of, we use often the example of a projector of white light on a screen, right? So the white light is just white light. Now you put a tziruf of Shem Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the light that will shine on the screen will look like a Yud, a Hey, a Vav, and a Hey. After 1 hour, the Yud, the Hey, is replaced with a Vav. So now it's Yud, Vav, Hey, Hey. So you're going to still see Yud Kei Vav Kei on the screen. It's just in a different order. And it's still the Chayes Aliki, it's still the light, it's still the same light. It's just coming out through a new tziruf. So that's what he's saying. So the Chayes is ratzo v'shuv. The flow is going constantly ratzo v'shuv. At the same time, it breaks down. As it breaks down each minute, in this second, every second actually, not just every hour, every second is a tziruf chadash. Good. Ki yesh kama madregas b'amshachas hachayis. And now the Rebbe Rashab explains, because there's a number of levels in the extension or we'll say the transmission of the energy. It's not just one energy coming from Elikus, not just one singular energy. Like for example, when you say that the chayes of Eliki is coming from the level of chesed, God is transmitting and bestowing kindness to us. There are times when chesed is shining. So chesed is also encompasses and is comprised of, includes within it, gvura. Ubchinas gvura shebe gvura. And then there's gvura within gvura. V'chein chesed shebe chesed. And same thing, there's chesed shebe chesed. Bekama pratim b'ribu me'oid. When you start breaking it down, it divides into a multitude of details. So it began as chesed and gvura and teferes, but you break it down, let's say by Sfiras Seimer, it ends up being 49 days, 49 Amshachas. Chesed shebe chesed is different than gvura shebe chesed. In general, it's chesed, but then it breaks into gvura shebe chesed. And if you break it even further, it could break into, that's 49. It could break into 100. If you take all the spheres, and that 100 can break again into another 10, 100 times 10, and you have 1,000, etc. And so basically giving examples of how the chayis is not just this seamless chayis. It has been broken down. That's exactly what ratzo v'shuv accomplishes, obviously, and therefore breaks into details. And every time there's a ratzo v'shuv, a istalkus and ispashtus, an ebb and a flow, a receding and extending, mischadesh hachayis b'chinas u'madrega acheres. The energy is renewed in a different level, not the same. That's the main point he's making here. It's not just a repeat of the same chayis. Ve'ima yes, the lamayla hakol hu b'chinas ein sof. Now he's like summing it up. So even though above everything is ein sof, like we said, it's timeless, it's spaceless, it's shapeless, and so on. Ubchinas achdus viskalus. and it's utterly seamlessly united, and in all is scholars. Everything includes it's all inclusive. But when the chayes alaki is nimshach, extends, it transmits below, it comes into a state of distinction, or you could say division. Diversity is the best word. The b'chol rega, every moment, nimshach hachayes acher, another energy flows, extends or transmits, and that's how Zman is created. That is the process. So in truth, if you think about it, it's the similar process to the creation of everything. First, God desires something. Then what did he do? He envisions it, created a tzimtzum, then a gili of a kav, and then a shtalshlus of first ak, and then Oiris and Kalim and Akudim, Vrudim, Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah. What we learn here is a specific focus on the creation of time, which is itself quite interesting. And from the seamless state of higher than time all the way into a state of actual structured time as we know it. And now he's going to go back and say, this is all Zman. What about Keser, Ratzon, that's higher than time? So he's going to go back to the central theme. But I think here's a good place to stop. Let me take any questions. Okay, moving along. I think this is good, nice. Anybody? I'm just looking at the Yud-based Serufim that you posted. Very nice. Okay. But
Well, why I'm curious. I mean, maybe you don't want to answer. Or, why? Again, I asked it before, but you're going and talking about or, and you're talking about withdrawal and expansion, and I'm wondering why the Rebbe is not using the language of tzimtzum and gilui. Or
honestly, I don't have that question even. He's the Rebbe. He knows this topic well. He doesn't feel the need to use it.
Is it not correct?
The only reason you feel the need is because you learned it somewhere. If you didn't know that language, you wouldn't have brought it up. Right?
But that's true. But I'm trying to understand if. Let me maybe drill down the question.
You're going to find this many places. There's many things that he brings. Sometimes it'll be clear. I can't answer that question, to be very honest. He could have brought it. I don't think he's deliberately and intentionally discussing it as a separate subject. But I personally think because it's not necessary and it's just confusing. Because he's not talking about Tzimtzum here. He's not talking about Gilui. He's talking about Ratzo v'Shuv, of creating a flow, like we're talking about rhythm. Tzimtzum and Gilui doesn't talk rhythm, language of rhythm, doesn't talk about Sheresh Hazman. That's my understanding. He's focused on what he wants to say here, and he doesn't need anything else.
Maybe
because you learned it. So you learned it. You'd like to connect it. That's fine. No.
Well, yes, I would, but I'm trying to understand whether the histalshalus of the dissension of divine energy that creates the world, that gives chayas v'chulu, and everything we learn about in Chassidus to connect with God and godliness. If that general construct is, if what we're talking about here in terms of time is a subpart or a subcontext of that flow, meaning, yes, you're right, Tzimtzum and Gilui is a general concept, but maybe we're talking about the pace or the meter of that histalshalus. But in other words, they're not two different things. This is a drilling down on the pace of that a revelation of light and even withdrawal of light.
This is where I would go into the category. If you were learning one-on-one with someone, or with me or with another teacher, would be a good conversation, because since you learned it in Chassidus, and you want to connect it, it would be a worthwhile discussion. From the point of view of Samach Vav itself, and my teaching it, I don't see the necessity to go there. Again, doesn't mean you can't go there. I'm not suggesting this is something off base, completely a different reality or something. Not at all. It's a discussion but you have to remember, when you start learning Chassidus, you can learn a lot more themes you haven't learned yet. And they all belong in this discussion as well. So it becomes, at some point, unwieldy, because you can't bring everything into the picture. You're talking about Tzimtzum and Gilui.
Right.
And there's more elements in that process of creation that belong in this discussion. So I look at it like Chassidus is one big body. And each place, like it says in some places, there's an expression in Chazal, Ashirim b'mokem echad, aniyim b'mokem acher. In one place it's Ashirim, you have a lot of material. Another place you don't have too much. But when you learn it all comes together as a bigger picture. So the general concept, no problem. As I said, I think that the Samach Tzedek does use more the word Tzimtzum and Gilui, because he doesn't really go into the details of ratzo v'shuv, the Samach Tzedek. He mentions it he mentions it, but not so much detail. But to me, it's part of the course. As I said, you'll find this in many places where something is discussed. It's not an omission. It's not lacking anything. It's pretty clear as it is. And another thing, when you say ratzo and shuv, so which one is ratzo? Tzimtzum, where do you see that Tzimtzum Arishan is called ratzo? Chassidus never uses the word ratzo and Tzimtzum. So you'll just have a big confusion going on. The Tzimtzum is a ratzo? Where does it say it's a Tzimtzum? Tzimtzum, it says the is kol b'mkerei. That's correct. But the word ratzo and kav is a shuv. I'm not saying it doesn't say anywhere, but that's a unique discussion itself. So as soon as you would say that, you'd right away get into another new area of discussion of, is Tzimtzum and kav actually ratzo v'shuv? Or not necessarily, because the Tzimtzum is like a complete stoppage of the oil altogether. There's no flow at all. Chayes ratzo v'shuv means the chayes is flowing, except it flows in an ebb and flow manner of istalkus and ispashtus. So I can go into this if I had to in detail. I don't want to go there because I'm not, I know the material quite well, as you can imagine. So, but the bottom line is, suffice it to say, trust the Rebbe Rashab. He doesn't feel the need to bring it. It's probably not necessary. That doesn't mean, again, that you can't, on your own, try to see the parallels or correlations.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there's one God who's flowing energy. That's for sure. It's called chayes. Higher, it's called ur. Like here, he also doesn't explain even what level of ur this is. Where is chayes ratzo v'shuv? Is it Atzilus? So he mentioned Atzilus. Is it higher than Atzilus? Is it lifnei at Tzimtzum? When you say chayes ratzo v'shuv, would you say chayes ratzo v'shuv lifnei at Tzimtzum?
Seems impossible.
Not so simple. He most likely would not say that. So that too is not exactly defined, but nevertheless, we know one thing for sure, that there are levels of Ur and Sof that go up to the highest levels as we've learned earlier. Then now we're talking about Chayes and ratzo v'shuv, and that becomes the root and source of structure of time. And we're going to learn more. There's going to be Moti v'lei Moti. There's a lot more to come. That's going to be quite elaborate.
Revelatory. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Thank you for your
There's
comments.
nothing wrong, as I said. I'm responding in kind.
Yeah, no, thank you for your commentary in response to my question.
Okay, so we'll stop here. Middle page, end of paragraph, page 59.
Do you want to say a vort about Beis Nisan? Today's Beis Nisan.
We said more than a vart. We just learned the whole piece from the Rebbe Rashab himself.
Fair enough, but something about his life or something about, I don't know, his Chassidus, I mean, in general, Bichlal, at a very high level.
I'll defer for another time for right now. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
It says that the Rebbe Rashab didn't like Kugel.
Sorry,
Now
he didn't like
that's
Google?
a vort. Now that's a vort.
It said I woke up at 3:15 in the morning. There was a siren and I couldn't fall back asleep. And the Farbrengen that Reb Isaac posted, the Mishpia was saying that the Rebbe Vishab wasn't a Kugel person. I forget why. I was too tired, but something that he wasn't a Kugel person. There you go,
And what
Rabbi.
was he a child person? I mean, I don't think he was a material person altogether.
Right, that's why I'm saying that he said he had nothing to do with the Kugel. So I don't know. I was too tired. Sorry.
That's fine. That's fine.
You have
Okay,
to have the
here's a question.
concept from Kasha in Temchet Mimi.
Bli klum I efsher, right? Bli klum I efsher. So I'll just share a quick story. Talk about Kugel. They once offered the Rebbe. They once gave the Rebbe Rashab Friday night I don't know if it was Friday night, but upon him soup. The soup had noodles in it, Lakshan noodles, and the Rebbe Rashab kept on trying to get the Lakshan. You know, sometimes it slips out of your spoon. So he was trying once, twice. It kept falling out of the spoon. So he was heard by his son whispering. He said, the Lakshan isn't ready yet. Meaning the Lakshan wasn't ready for the birur to be elevated. So for him, the slipping out of the spoon was not just an accident. It was meaning the Lakshan was not ready to cooperate yet and be elevated to the next level. So that's a nice little vort.
Very nice. Very nice. By the way, did you
see? He's a man that lived what he
lived as Chassidus.
Exactly. So if he talked about this, he lived the Chassidus, and
did you work with the Rav for bringing last night, Nachum Grunwald? Apparently he was a choser also.
He was a young student in my day. He would come like many of the young students would come and help out. He was to come talk to me. He was a chassid. It was I think they were which chassidim were they? From Williamsburg.
Popper.
Two brothers. They were two brothers. They were
Popper Chassidim, no?
Not Bobov. No.
Popper.
Ger?
Popper Chassidim, right? Popper Chassidim.
He wasn't Chabad?
Not from birth. There were a lot of guys that would come to classes. They were attracted to different classes. They were attracted to different classes in Tanya, Rabbi Yoel's classes, some of his students, Mendel Vechter. So him and his brother were young guys. I remember they used to come talk to me, Farbrengen with me, to get a sense of Chassidus. So there was a lot of bochum like that would come and they'd help out. I wouldn't identify them all as chayzrim. Let me put it that way. Just because someone helped out doesn't mean he was a chayzer.
Fair enough.
Not taken away from anyone's qualities, But they were nice guys.
He's a quality guy.
Huh?
He's a quality guy.
Yeah. He writes essays. He's a scholarly fellow. How was the Farbrengen? Let me stop here.
Where did he Farbrengen yesterday?
Let me just stop in the middle of page 59.